Hello and welcome to the Tar Heel Teachers Book Club. I'm Marlo Artis. The Tar Heel Teachers Book Club is our monthly opportunity to discuss great books. Each month, we are joined by a wonderful panel of North Carolina educators who love dissecting great texts. We will start our introductions with our friend from Hope County.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jenny Clark, and I work at Sandy Grove Elementary School in Hope County. I have been in education for 13 years. 9 of those years were in the classroom, and this is my 4th year as a media coordinator. You can find me on Twitter at Clark's Owl Stars. That's owl, like the bird, not all. And on Instagram at jenny.clark.reads.
I am Molly Holloman, and I have been a librarian in Dare County Schools for 9 years. And you can find me on Twitter at Molly Brandon.
Hello, I'm Kelly Boquette, the 2021 Burroughs Welcome Fund Piedmont Tri-Region Teacher of the Year, and I'm the K-5 music educator at the Elements Virtual School and Elements Burlington School System. And I'd love to connect with you on Twitter. My handle is KA Poquette.
Hi, I'm Pamela Sands, and I'm a digital learning facilitator in Cumberland County Schools. I've been in education for 24 years now, and I'm a former media coordinator, the current 2021 Media Coordinator of the Year for NCSLMA, and you can find me on Twitter at LivingPamtastic.
Hi, I'm Christy Sartain. I'm the librarian at Hope County High School in Hope County. I've been a librarian for 9 years and been in education for 12 years. I am on Twitter at GetYourDorkOn and Instagram as well.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Arisha Smalls, and I'm the Elementary AIG Program Specialist for Cumberland County Schools, and you can follow me on Twitter at Smalls Arisha.
Awesome. Our September 2021 Tar Heel Teachers Book Club is Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. Be sure to share your thoughts on Twitter by using our hashtag THT Book Club. After her mother dies in an accident, 16-year-old Bree Matthew wants nothing to do with her family memories or childhood home, so she hightails at the UNC for a residential early college program. Her perfect escape turns into a life-changing adventure when she witnesses a magical attack on her very first night. Legendborn is filled with mystery, an intriguing magic system, a modern-day twist on the classic Arthurian legend, and a lot of Southern Black girl magic. So what are your thoughts about Legendborn? There's so much to talk about.
Dun, dun, dun. Everyone has something to say. I have to tell you all, I have to be honest, I own 2 copies of this book because I love it so much. And it has this beautiful shiny sticker on it, which is really why I had to buy a second copy. But this is just full of so many things, like the fact that it's contemporary fantasy is really amazing. It's set in a real place at Chapel Hill, which, let's be honest, that's why I got it in the first place. But it just really blew my mind how she folded in all the things that you just said, Marlo. Like, it's just jam-packed full of, and so many things you didn't say. But we can do spoilers.
We can do spoilers.
And Molly, I know this is not a competition, but I'm pretty sure I have you beat, girl, because I have 3 copies. I have this book, I have it on audio, and I have the ebook. Loved this book. When I was growing up, book covers did not look like this. I mean, Black girl, curly hair, like, this is me. Well, she's cuter, but I'm just saying, like, it's one good reason to pick the book up. The cover art's awesome.
I'm going to go along with what Molly said. Like, it is just this wild blend of awesomeness, and you don't ever feel like it, there's like the Arthur thing, and then there's the UNC thing, and there's like being a 16-year-old thing, and it never felt to me like it was ever off balance. Like, it was just like the right amount of all of them at the right time.
What I love about this book is there's so much diversity in it, and I feel like all of us educators, we have, students of all different backgrounds, and this is one of those books that has something for everybody. Like, you can read this book and be like, oh, I relate with this character. I relate with this character. Love this book. Love this book. Highly recommended.
Going along with that, Jenny, I love that the diversity of the character is not their only identity. Whether it's dealing with a character's sexuality or dealing with their race, like, that's not the focus of the book. They all of the characters are so well developed and defined as characters, and that's one part of who they are, but it's not like a defining part of who they, I mean, of course it's a defining part of who they are, but that's not like the only focus. Like they all have value outside of these generalities, these singular characteristics.
I remember reading the blurb of the book, and I'm like, how in the world are they going to put together King Arthur legend and Black Southern Girl magic and make it work? And oh my gosh, it worked. Like,
You at Chapel Hill.
Yeah, wow, I'm blown away. I'm blown away. And I think the cry factor of it, because I'm a very emotional reader, and I don't know about y'all, but I get really into the books, and the cry factor part of that was the earth magic and all that. I just, oh my gosh, those scenes, I was sobbing going through those, and I'm like, this is a YA book. Why am I so invested in this? But Bree is just one of those characters that you don't forget. You absolutely do not forget.
And those historical elements through those ancestral walks were so powerful.
One of my favorite lines that I thought summed up the entire book really was when Patricia said everything has two histories, especially in the South. And I felt like that echoed in so many things, like the King Arthur line and the ancestral walks, you know, like those two things really echoed each other. And then you have kind of like the above ground Carolina and then like the secret underground Carolina. And, you know, I just thought that those things, that sentence right there to me defined the whole book.
That like gives me goosebumps. Like I got it when I read it. I just got them again when you said that. Like it's so true, especially being in the South. Like, you know, we see this stuff.
I agree completely. There, I just, you know, I really thought, I know Marlo is a Carolina alum as well. I don't know if anyone else in the group is, but you know, reading so much of how that got poured in a very authentic way, really, you know, it was raw to read that, you know, as somebody who went there and you know, don't have the same experience that Tracy, you know, she talks about, you know, when you hear her talk about this book, and I've heard her speak a couple of times, she talks about her experiences there and that she deeply loves Carolina, but she also has to reckon with the hard history. And I think that comes through in Bree very clearly, and it just kind of it's opened up me to think a little bit more about like the things that the histories that I question. Like I live in Dare County and recently went to Fort Raleigh where the Lost Colony is and learned that it was a stop on the Underground Railroad. And that's just something that doesn't, you know, it's not a focus. Most people go there to learn about the Lost Colony. They don't go to learn about the Freedmen's Colony that existed towards the end of the Civil War. And it just makes you wonder what other histories we are not hearing the other side, or we have to dig literally sometimes, because there's a lot of archaeological digs about the Lost Colony. There's not so much about the Freedmen's Colony. So I don't know, just kind of opens up.
I was going to say, I love the way that Tracy Deonn kind of shows you the history lines. Like for the secret society, their whole historical lineage is documented on this huge wall. But when we want to know about the historical background of Bree, we actually have to walk in her ancestors' shoes to find out. And I think that is very current, that it's the written history versus the walk of these people. So it's very vivid for me.
Marlo, what do you think?
So, I think a lot of things about a lot of things with this book. I mean, it's so many different pieces with the book that really had me thinking of how did it all fit together. So, like when we're learning all the stuff about, the order and how all of that works, and then knowing all the stuff with Bree and her mother, and then what Patricia disclosed about her mother, and then trying to get all the pieces, that was part of the adventure for me. It's like, how is all of this going to connect? And boy, did it connect at the end in such a rich way that really was like so shocking. Like, oh my gosh, I knew that Bree was going to be such a powerful character in the book. So in my mind, I was thinking like she's gonna have more power than Cell and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, she's gonna be the top dog when it's all said and done. It's like, what? That was shocking for me.
Yeah.
See, and that's a question I had. Did y'all see it coming?
I didn't see all that.
No, I
didn't see all of that,
so
but I felt like it was going to go in that direction.
Sorry, Risha.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sam.
I was with Marlo. Like I felt like she was going to be more powerful in some way, like something they'd never seen before, but I did not see that in her path.
Same. So yes, same Marlo and Sands. I did think that she was going to be, in charge, like ruling the day. I did get a little worried as we were like nearing the end of the book, like, okay, y'all, like, how does this happen? Where does it come from? Because Nick has been called. Some man spoke through him. I thought this was supposed to happen to Bree. Like, I was really like leaning like, okay. But then to find out, and we are doing spoilers, yes, as always, right? But then to find out that it was
no.
Huh?
So, but it's such a big one. It's such a big
They
spoiler.
should have read the book. They should have read the book. They didn't have them up.
I won't do it. But y'all know. You know what I'm saying.
Reddit, you know.
And I'm with you. I was worried that it was going to get drug out into even the second book. There's another YA series where you don't find out. We all know that the character is the most powerful thing, like in the first couple of chapters, but she doesn't find out to the end of the second book. And I was reading it like there aren't a lot of pages left. We gotta we gotta get to this conclusion quickly. And I'm so glad that it was done in the first book and in the way it was. It was fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about the characters? Like, the characters are just so authentic. I really feel like we're set in this world where all of these fantasy things are happening. We're living in a modern day King Arthur society, and we've got demons coming from other realms and Shadowborns and all of these things that are so unreal, but yet the characters are so real. Like, I feel like these are people I know.
Very authentic characters. That was probably my favorite part of the book is, you could totally picture what they look like. And yeah, very, very relatable character. She did a very good job, weaving. The whole story is fantastic.
And they all have so much depth.
I was just going to say, yeah, dimension. There's so much dimension. Like, Alice is not just like the best friend that shows up when she's needed, and I thought the same thing with some of the people that you meet in the order. Like, Greer stands out as one that's like, it's not like a one-dimensional person. They all have these stories that we wish we could know more about them.
Mm-hmm. And I always
have like a T-chart, like favorite characters, least favorite characters, and like on my favorite character side, I have Bree, I have Cell, I have William. William's the man. And then on the line, not like it's like teetering, I have Alice. I don't dislike her. She's not my favorite person.
Maybe you didn't like when she kept telling Bree, calling Bree's daddy and telling what was going on.
I think that's what it was. At some point, I'm just like, best friend, I need you to hold me down. Like, that's what I wanted to say to her. Best friend, just chill for a second.
But let me say this. If my best friend came home looking toe up like Bree did multiple days, I am calling your daddy. I am going to call your neighbor. I am going to call whoever I can call, because that girl was jacked up when she would return back to that dorm, and Alice didn't know what was going on.
A couple of times, but at first, sometimes the dad got involved it was premature. Sometimes I think Alice she was too scary for me right in the beginning. And I also had...
the girl started the book in the back of a police car. I think it was okay for the daddy to get involved.
I disagree. So, and I have Nick on the line. I don't dislike Nick. I like him. He just wasn't my favorite. And the only thing that I have on my least favorite characters is the Hellhound and other things of the sort.
Well, I'll say about William, I was on the fence about William, and I wrote multiple times, like, can she trust William? Because I just was like, I don't know if this is going to turn left. And I was happy that it never turned left. At least not
Why?
in this
Why did you
book.
think it was? I didn't get that.
It was like he was too good. Like he was too supportive. He was too willing to listen. Almost. But I was the same way. Just like Mara, I was waiting for the other foot to drop. Like this is not, or the other shoe to drop. This is not going to end well for Bree because William's going to end up being a bad guy, and that's going to be terrible. And because I love William, and I didn't want that. But yeah, absolutely. When I was reading it, I kept thinking he's going to be the one. He's going to be the one.
Well, I
Because
think
you
we're
kept
so
thinking, like,
in YA literature where everybody has this other side to them, this darker side, and it always seems to be the female lead who gets betrayed. And so we always assume that when they put their trust in somebody, they're going to get betrayed. They shouldn't be trusting this person because that just is kind of the norm. So I love that was not the norm.
And so,
okay, I have to ask. Okay, bring up Sal in just a second, Kelly, because that's going to turn us to like a huge turn. I know it's coming. Okay, but I want to add this about Pam. So, anybody was like, were you seeing the Evan thing? Like when you say betrayal, like I think of Evan, right? Like I didn't see that coming, but I also felt like that was one thing that like that would have maybe been the hook, right? Like if there was more of a connection with Evan before the cave, I might have been even more like, what?
He didn't betray anybody. That creature killed him and took his form. So it wasn't actually Evan doing any kind of betrayal.
But we didn't even know Evan was an imposter until like later on in the book. It's like if there was a connection, like Molly's saying, like maybe she would have had a little light romance with an Evan type. Then it was like, dang, this girl got really played.
And just side note, that whole cave scene with Evan and all that fumbling around in the dark, that creeped me out.
Me too.
I had to read that fast. Okay, Kelly. All right, Kelly, take us to Sel.
Sel, right? Because you're like, oh, he's the brooding, dark character, right? But then like you learn more about his mom and like feelings for Nick and just all this stuff that makes him so like the depth and the complexity of Sel. I didn't always like him. And he never really became like a guy that you're like, oh yeah, let's go out and like have a fun time. But I enjoyed his character more and more as the book went on.
See, and from the beginning, I felt like there's good in him. Like we're gonna find he's gonna be a decent guy.
Well, he was just doing his job the whole time. So even as he was navigating, he was doing what he was assigned to do. I will tell you one thing that bothered me about his mom. Like when it was the big reveal that his mom was responsible for all this stuff, I'm like, why does it have to be a woman? Why does it have to be a woman that did all this, caused all these issues? So I was so happy when it was real later on that it was Laura Davis who was behind all this stuff and set her up. I was like, phew, we don't have that negative depiction out there.
I just want to say this about Sel. I don't know if anybody else does this when they're reading, but like I can't ever see the faces very clearly, but I know what they're wearing. Like Sel has on, and this is so bad. So Sel has on like black cargo pants with like army boots laced up and like a trench coat. Is he dressed like that in your mind?
A lot of black.
Not the trench coat.
Like black on
a
black
lot
on
of black. Maybe a tight fitting t-shirt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And the trench coat's like flowy in the wind, like this unknown Beyonce breeze for his coat. Yes.
I like Sel. I hope she ends up with Sel. I think that Bree and Sel have a connection. I felt it when they were at the quarry at the very beginning, and then at the end when they had that moment. Then they were still together. I know they're looking for Nick and all this kind of stuff, but I just like their connection, and I just feel like it's like so much unspoken connection that they have, and it really feels really deep. So I'm like, if they end up together, I will be very happy.
I hope more just comes out in the next book or two. I just hope their relationship has some more depth, because I'm with you, Marlo, there's something there.
You know what just flashed
Alice gonna end up with anybody?
I thought Dallas doesn't have a girlfriend. I thought she had a girlfriend.
Yeah,
She
I
was
think
dating someone at some
No.
point.
And you know what? Her and William, I know that's not William's thing, but her and
It's not
William seem to
Alice's
get
thing.
along.
Alice has a girlfriend. Where did
I
I
think you're
get that
right.
from?
I
That
think
is
you're
in the
right.
book.
Are you
Alice has a
sure?
I think
girlfriend.
it mentioned something
Yes,
about a previous girlfriend, but I don't know if it's a current girlfriend.
I thought there
I'm
was
gonna
somebody
find it.
she went out with or something like that. Okay,
I thought
Kelly
William was
was like
older.
She is not
Kelly's
gonna
been
get
over
with
there
William, Alicia.
calculating something.
Okay,
I've
so
been seeing you
I,
going like this. Like I feel like you have
it
like
just
this.
popped in my head, people. So it's gonna date me, but like freshman year of college, Dawson's Creek. Like it's like Cell is Dawson, and Nick is Pacey, or maybe like reversed. And then there's like the Joey. And I don't. Does anyone know Dawson's
It's the
Creek? Like to
reverse.
make that
It's the
connection.
Yes, but I think
reverse.
it's reversed.
It's the reverse.
Reverse. So
It's reversed.
Cell is Dawson. No.
No,
Pacey. Cell is
Cell is
Pacey.
Pacey.
Dawson
yes,
is
that was Pacey.
okay. Like
Yeah.
it just like that hit. I'm like, oh.
I could see that.
She was cooking. So, do you guys think that Cell knew about her before she figured it out? Do you think Cell had a hint? You do, Christy?
I think he sensed something, but he didn't know what it was.
Okay.
So he probably had more of a clue than anybody else because he has the magic. So I think he would is a little bit more in tune to it than anybody else.
He was always suspicious too. But he didn't know, like when she said, I can smell it, and he's like, you can smell my ether? Like he didn't, like Christy said, he didn't get the depth of what it was, but he was always, well, and of course her coming is just suspicious on its own. She's the only African-American person in the order. Like that alone right there, sadly, just makes it different.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, did
because
that
she's an
difference come
outlier,
up.
and when she shows up, all these crazy things. It's just the timing was bad. So yeah, so then she looks a little suspicious. Yeah.
She would have looked suspicious if the stuff didn't come up because these people have biases against her because it came out in the book. So even if she would have showed up, nothing would have happened. They still would have been like, go get me. The mom was like, aren't you here to help serve and all that kind of stuff? It's like,
touching her hair.
excuse me.
And all the comments when she got picked to be the squire, all of those things those people were saying.
Nasty.
Yeah.
Nasty. And what about the police officer whenever he was in the car and he was like, now how did y'all swing this? How did you get in? I mean, it's like there were a lot of microaggressions that came through and little sly comments. And I'm glad that Tracy included that in the book because it made Bree a very relatable character, that you are in this white space and these are things that come up. And she just communicated it very authentically throughout the book.
I liked the whole,
What
I
did y'all
think it
think?
was, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I liked, I think it was Greer and Witty. I feel like anytime one is mentioned, the other is mentioned, but the whole, like, you're here to disrupt things. Like, I love that, Greer has the they them pronouns and, Bree is a Black female, in this pretty much all white, order. So I love disruption and stuff like that. So I thought that was really cool.
Jen, you were on the
know.
same wavelength. That was the other quote that I had written down for this conversation was when he talks about disrupting and that they should start a club.
And how small is their world that one Black girl is such a disruption. That's what kept with the family tree and all of that going on. It's just it's got a lot of depth, but it's very, very small.
I was gonna ask what you guys thought about Dr. Patricia.
I loved her.
I wanted her to have more of a role. Like I don't know. I feel like there's more
She might be a
there.
good person, but not a good therapist.
She couldn't separate. After she found out, she couldn't separate the two. She had a hard time separating the two.
I kind of feel like she abandoned Bree a little bit, just like gave up on her a little bit too quick. Especially with like the root power, not even considering the therapy aspect of it.
I feel like there wasn't enough nurturing. It was like, let me show you something. Now you've seen it. Like, it wasn't like, I feel like it was very brief. I feel like more could have happened with that relationship. And maybe maybe we'll see her in the future. I don't know.
I think it was hard for her because she had to overcome a lot of that keep it quiet that she had grown up with all of her life. We don't talk about this. We don't talk about this. We don't bring other people in. So she didn't really know Brie enough to open up that much to her. So when she did, sorry, my dog's going crazy. So when she did finally take her on that walk, I think that was a big point for both of them, where they were both like, okay, now we can talk about this. Now we can have a real relationship and start moving forward and have that maybe more of a mentor-mentee relationship that they had before. But because that side of the magic and that part of it is such a secret, and it's not talked about at all, I think that's probably why she was not overly enthusiastic about diving into it.
Oh,
Did
and
she also?
does too. Like your sorry,
Go ahead,
Marla.
Did she also pull back because I can't find anything about Alice? This is a 500-page book, people. I can't find about Alice. I have to find that. But Alice was mentioned, and she is interested in females, so she's not thinking about William Marisha. So, but do you think that Patricia maybe pulled back because Bree's family was connected to Bloodcraft? Was that whenever she pulled back when she found out that they were like on different paths of it? Because she said there were two different strands of it. And her strand was not the Bloodcraft because Breeze had a longer line. It's kind of like after that is when Patricia was like, I'm going to have to get somebody else. I think she was a little afraid of it.
Well, that, and from the beginning, though, she said, you know, there's a reason your mom didn't introduce this to you. And I think she was very hesitant out of respect for whatever this reason is. Like, there was a powerful reason why she didn't bring you into this. And I think Patricia was a little afraid or hesitant to cross that line that Bree's mom had drawn.
I was thinking that even though she was aware that the mom didn't share it, it's like, but this girl's out in the world alone. Like, this would be a time to give her some guidance. And I think that's what I was looking for from Patricia, was like, I know that nobody has told you and it's been a secret, but you need to know because it's a part of who you are. And there's nobody at this point in the story that can tell her anything else about, you know, that side of her.
And just stepping away from the root craft, like she's a therapist and Brie has experienced a lot of trauma. Like that should be something she can do without, you know, the root. But
and I
liked her. I wanted to know about her scarf. She wore a lot of scarves, and Brie was very particular about telling us what the combo was and the colors. But then nothing really happened with that. So I want to know what the scarves are about.
I didn't catch that.
Oh yeah, the scarves. And I hope Grandma comes back because Bree's ancestors were very interesting. I want to know more about them.
Well,
could you imagine walking around with somebody else in your head, helping you make decisions or telling you yes, no?
Well, I kind of,
especially your grandma.
I would say that's actually my life. My grandma's always in my head. But I really kind of like the way that Tracy took that particular aspect of her having the trauma and the before Brie, pre-Brie, and after Brie, and how she could put the wall up and put it down. She also had to tap into that when it was time to shut her grandma up for a few minutes whenever she had to listen to another part. So it's like that was very interesting the way that was so layered. Like she had to tap into that even later on into the book.
But didn't she even have to do that when I think Arthur tried to show up before? Or when her magic tried to show up?
Because, you know, Arthur's talking and Grandma's talking and she's like, no, not now, Grandma.
Yeah, so like she has to do that. So the quote that I pulled, well, one of the quotes I pulled is from Marlowe, page 488. It says, if I concentrate, I can almost feel 3 heartbeats behind my ribs, different rhythms, different origins, all me. So I really like that because at the end, she really is all of these things. I think she was on this journey to find her mom, but she also found herself along the way, which I think was always a secondary motive. Like, yeah, I need to find my mom, but in finding her, I'm going to know more about me too. And then she finds out all of her at the end. So I really like that.
I think too, like when you're her age, I reflect upon myself at that age, like you are obviously figuring out who you are, but you're not necessarily consciously going, and today I will figure out who I am and I will figure this out. You just kind of, it just happens. And then you reflect when you're older and like, oh, I was figuring stuff out then. And yeah, so it's kind of just a natural part of it without even realizing it's happening. And I had a quote too, this is earlier in the book, and I interacted with this book as an audiobook, which was great. And it was Some Truths Only Tragedy Can Teach, which was Bree earlier in the book, of course, when she's talking about like the after Bree and everything. And it kind of made me go, yeah, like there's some things you can only get if you've gone through it.
Well, and I think very much so. I think anybody who has experienced any kind of trauma, you do have like a before and an after person. And it kind of reminded me of like John Green's Looking for Alaska, where it's like broken like before and then after. And that, you know, Brie reminded me a lot of that because, you know, she's a very different person just because of the fact that she lost her mom in such a tragic way.
It's going to be interesting in the second book how everybody has to deal and navigate with the revelation of who Brie really is and how it's going to impact everybody else around her. And that's what happens. So when you have these big celebrities who, you know, hit it overnight and they become these big, huge stars, it's everybody around you that changes. You're the same person, but then everybody else around you changes. So then that causes you to change. So I'm really interested to see how Brie is going to evolve now that she's going to have this new role, this new responsibility, and everybody how they're going to be navigating around her.
Especially because she wanted to, you know, get her information about her mom and get out. And that's probably not going to happen.
And how is that going to affect her? How is that going to affect her high school situation? Because she's basically in a boarding school on campus in high school. How is now being who she is going to tie into that? Because I would think it would be fairly difficult to try to maintain a GPA like you need to for that program and be the top echelon of this group.
Well,
and you kind of already have
classes.
And you already kind of have an idea of who's going to be hesitant to this person in power just because of one of the ending scenes, the order. Is that what you're saying?
Tor.
Tor. Oh,
yes.
Yeah, because one of the ending scenes when, you know, they have to do something and there's some that were really resistant. So we'll see.
Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts about the book? It has so many different things. I mean, we've just really touched on the surface because there's so much. Any characters anybody wants to lift up or any particular scenes? I mean, it's just so many pieces to this book.
One thing that I found interesting is I listened to Tracy speak a couple of weeks ago, and I read the book in January, and then I listened to her speak about her story and how it impacted the book, and then listening to it again, I was like, oh my gosh, it makes so much sense. Like I see all of these little parts of her personal life, you know, interwoven throughout the book. And I thought that was fabulous, especially now that I know that about her and rereading the book. I just thought it was very well done.
I agree, Jenny. I was very lucky to actually get to see Jenny at this event, and I had the same experience. So I knew I was going to go back and reread the book, but having so much insight from her and understanding where some of the major components come from is from her life, you know, and the way that she translated kind of some really deep trauma into something very complex. And then that informs so many new people as readers. You know, I think that's what good books do is they teach us something, you know. I mentioned earlier, like I walked campus very differently than Tracy did, and so many other people that go to UNC. So, you know, I can bear witness to somebody that I can't personally experience because of the way that she translated those traumas into this book. And it's just really beautiful. It's complex and hard. There's a lot of feelings, but just the beautiful craft that she puts it into it. You know, I can't overstate how remarkable her writing is.
Absolutely.
I did not go to UNC, but I did find myself while I was reading, like pulling up my phone to like look up some of the landmarks that were mentioned. I was like, is that a real place or is that so I don't know if anybody else did that, but I definitely was doing that throughout the book. I didn't have to look up Bojangles. I knew that part was real.
Awesome. Really great conversation. Really excellent book. If you haven't picked up a copy yet or haven't gotten it on Audible, make sure you get it because it's so good. When we return, we'll be joined by the author herself. Tracy Deonn joins us in just a moment. We'll be right back. We are back on the Tar Heel Teachers Book Club, and we're now being joined by Tracy Deonn, instant New York Times bestselling author, winner of the Coretta Scott King Award, John Steptoe for New Talent Author Award, and North Carolinian. Please give it up for Tracy Deonn. We are so excited to have you here, Tracy. We've been looking forward to this conversation. We're so glad that you have joined us. So I want to start with one of the central components of the book. Race is mentioned throughout the book. Bree has different experiences, both covert and overt racism that she has to deal with. And I know that some of the microaggressions that were included in the book, there were some of your personal experiences that you had to make it authentic. So, and you also talk about Carolina's racial history and share some of the things about the university. So why was it important for you to include race and racism in this fantasy?
You know, I really love the genre of contemporary fantasy. So coming at it from a reader, those are the books that I'm always most drawn to. But one thing I noticed is that a lot of them they sort of put the pedal to the gas really heavily on one or the other, and not in sort of like equal measure. And so it was really important for me to challenge myself from a craft perspective. What if we dealt, almost 50-50 with fantastic elements and contemporary elements, and also to be able to have this conversation about Western fantasy and King Arthur and how all of those stories get positioned, and taking that to other forms of mythology, which include, frankly, like our own history, right? Like American history gets mythologized in its own way. And so I really wanted to make sure that I was at a site where that conversation would be easy to have, which is why it's at Carolina. But also having that conversation means talking about how the country was built, how the school was built. And I wanted Bree, because I knew where she was going to end up at the end of the book, I knew that I needed to create momentum and conflict along the way to show like how momentous this reveal really is, not just for her, but for everyone in this society. What it means to say, actually, our mythology has been disrupted and probably has always been disrupted by the realities of racism and power and systemic oppression. And we've been trying to not act like that, but that the reality is that's there from the beginning. And that's like very similar to things like the 1619 Project, right? Like, actually, we need to say that these things have been there from the beginning, and there's been mythologies that reduce it and talk around it. I knew I wanted to say like, no, it's going to be there, and it's going to be, we're going to lead up to this reveal that shows that there's a deep intersection.
And you just handled it so beautifully. It was so well done. Like, I remember in the beginning, I'm like, and it keeps going. It was just so real and so relatable in so many ways.
Yeah. And well, and it was also, I guess the other thing I would say is that, I wanted to have that experience, for the reader to have that experience of what racism actually feels like, which is that you have a goal. You're trying to go to the grocery store, or you're trying to get an education, or you're trying to go to the DMV, and racism rears its ugly head and disrupts your goal and presents obstacles and challenges. So Bree's not there to be some sort of champion for, you know, anti-racism. That's not her job. Her goal is, I want to find out what happened to my mother. It just so happens that there's a layer of antagonism that keeps showing up. And that to me is very much, when I think about my own story, that's how racism feels. Like, I mean, you know, all my memories of being a student, either in, you know, public school, K through 12, or at Carolina, being like, I was really just trying to take a test, and then this comment happened, or I really was trying to learn in this classroom, and then this horrible conversation came up, and now I got to deal with it. And, you know, and it just feels like a, you know, an everyday antagonism.
Tracy, whenever I read books, there's always like some characters I'm like, oh, I wish I knew more about this one, or I wish I knew more about that one. Is there a certain character that you wish that you could have dove deeper and maybe perhaps is coming out in a future book that we could learn more about?
Yes. I mean, there's some really, I mean, we're talking about spoilers here, right? Like I can just,
yes.
So like there's some really deep. I think there are some pretty obvious ones, like Selwyn's mother, Natasha. Like I just, you know, she's really fascinating to me. And I think her story and Bree's mother's story, there's a really interesting opportunity. You know, if I were to ever have an opportunity, like a prequel novella or something, like I really think, even though we know what happened between them and we know what Lord Davis did 25 years ago, I still want to see those two and how they interacted and how they became friends, and, you know, what was that relationship like? And we as the reader would know that Bree's mother is a scion of Arthur who's dormant. And we would know that she was interacting with the King's Mage, who technically should be probably protecting her, but they don't know that. And so I think like it would be fun to play with that story, because I would still read that. Like if I was a reader, I'd be like, oh yeah, I know what happens. I know that Bree's mom dies. I know that Natasha, like, you know, goes away. I know that Lord Davis continues to be a jerk. Like I know all that stuff, but like, what about all this other, you know, what about these other interactions between these two women? You know, I just think that'd be great. William is a character that I imagine has a really rich life outside of the Legendborn. He talks about how he has a partner, he has a boyfriend who's not Legendborn, and you get the feeling, at least when I wrote it, I'm like, he's like, and I am never gonna date one of y'all. Like he's like, I keep my life separate. So I think that, you know, a day in the life of William would be pretty cool, just to see how he navigates things. And, you know, he clearly is, you know, one of the more healthy, balanced characters. And so finding ways to disrupt that and show where he's not, because he's still a person, I think it would be fun to look at, because he's so safe and warm and reasonable to Bree, which is exactly what she needs. But, you know, we can't all be that all the time. So probably William.
Well, I am all in for this prequel. So when you write it,
publisher.
yeah. And my question kind of is similar to Kelly's about characters. Is there a character that you found like their story was difficult to put together, difficult to write, or just kind of getting all of the pieces of that character?
I think it's hard to write. Two characters come to mind. One, it's really hard to write Nick. He's probably the most challenging character for me to write, because he is very much the like heroic golden Captain America type character. And it's not that I remember I've had readers say like, I just kept waiting for him to be evil. And I'm like, he's actually not. Like he's dealing with a lot of demons, and he definitely has a lot going on, real demons and emotional, you know, sort of archetypal demons, but he's actually a good person, and he is doing his best, and he makes bad choices just like everybody. So, but it was hard to sort of balance that. How do you keep that person interesting while having him be that, like he genuinely is into Bree, he genuinely is heroic and thinks that the innocent should be protected. You know, he genuinely is all that stuff. It's not fake, but how do you keep that interesting? And then the other character is Alice. Alice, actually, her coming into the story, coming into the Legendborn sort of with information at the end of the book, was not originally written like that. And I had fallen into a storytelling trap and had, if you've ever heard this phrase of like women in refrigerators, Gail Simone, is a comic book writer, talks about how she's one who sort of came up with this idea that there's a writing trope where a woman gets, you know, hurt, murdered, something, and it helps the male character advance his story. And so the example is based off of a weird comic where someone's girlfriend got like stuffed in a fridge, and that was his like call to action, and then he went and triumphed. And if you start thinking about it, there are all these instances where a woman in a man's life has something bad happen to her, and that is the catalyst to change and to like fight back or whatever. And so I think I had sort of like partially fridged Alice in the first few drafts. When she has that interaction with Isaac, she really didn't fully recover, and she didn't come back as, you know, that was a line that was crossed for Bree. And then she needed to sort of go forward. But I realized I needed her to have an ally going in, and I wanted Alice to show what she's made of, because Alice in the first part of the book is very much like in conflict with Bree. She's struggling with her relationship with her, because they've been friends their whole life, but now they're in this, you know, residential space, which is so common. Exactly what happened to me going to college. I made the mistake of rooming with my best friend. They tell you not to for a reason, because the dynamics change, and you think you're dealing with a stranger, and that person's not as fun or whatever. You're not as fun as you thought you were going to be or whatever. So I knew that I wanted her to have an arc. I didn't realize that her arc was going to lead her to being a part of Bree's life and coming into the Legendborn, but like not being anything but Team Bree. Like Alice is there for Bree. Like she's like, okay, this is cool. She's an analytical person, you know, she wants to go into law. So she's like, yeah, I'm catching on to all this. I'm soaking up all this information really quickly. It was fun to write that, because I'm like, of all people in this whole, you know, of every person in this cast, Alice is the one who's gonna like really soak it up and like just be able to get in there and jump in. And she does. And so I'm really glad that I made that choice to bring her in. And it's opened up everything for the second book to be able to have Alice be a part of the story. And she gets to be a little bit of a self-insert character in book 2, because whenever she shows up, she's new to things. And so it's helpful to have somebody who doesn't know as much as Bree, and who is approaching the situation with like her own questions and stuff like that.
I love everything that you've shared about Alice, and I think a lot about before Bree and after Bree. And there's I forget what page, but it's like there's no before, there's no after, there's only now. And I think that Alice is a part of that. And I think when we all go through things, to have that one person who's in our life who knows the before and the after, and is present for the now, I think that eases whatever the transition is. So I think that's so cool. Since we're talking about your writing process, I did see a post on Instagram where you had Legendborn. It was like a photo, and then it said book 1. So I wanted to know, it made me ask the question, when you set out to write Legendborn, did you know that it was going to be a series? Like, did you know there was going to be something after it? And if you did know that, how does that change the writing process for you, like a standalone story versus a series?
Yeah, so when you sell a book, and I don't know exactly how it is nowadays, but I imagine it's very similar. In my case, I knew I wanted it to be a trilogy, but when I sold it, you know, publishers are very sort of skittish about committing to whole series if the first book isn't written. In my case, the first book was not written, so I sold it on proposal. I'd written half of it and then outlined the rest, and I had a synopsis, a 3-page synopsis for the first book, the second book, and the third book. And so they knew that I had a plan. They knew that I was willing to go somewhere, but you kind of have to say, oh, this is standalone with series potential, and here's all the potential that I can show you that there's there. And so they bought 2. So they actually only bought the first 2 books in the series, and they reserved the option to buy the third based on how things were going to go. They weren't sure. And so I was very much heading into it sort of like in an underdog position, like I'm going to have to prove to them that this book is, you know, it's worth finishing the trilogy, that it's going to be, you know, valuable, you know, a good choice for them to purchase. And that definitely has come to fruition through lots of hard work and lots of sacrifices and stuff trying to make that happen. But I will say, from a creative standpoint, those 2 synopses they're almost useless now. I mean, it's hard pill to swallow because I am a planner and I am a plotter and I am a, be 6 steps ahead. But the reality for me is that writing, I discover so much as I write because I write from emotional arcs first and foremost. So like the before Bree and the after Bree, that imagery of like how Bree thought of herself was really important for me to hold on to. And I sort of have to, keep that clutch so I don't get lost. And when you write from an emotional place, you'll get yourself to a scene that you planned. And then you're like, she would never do that. Now that she just, like, I think there's a good example, like this is a small one, but Bree comes out of the memory walk with Patricia, immediately runs to the Legendborn house, to the lodge, because she's had this vision of like a shadowborn baby, and she's like, oh my gosh, Cell. So she goes talk to William and they have this conversation, and she gets really, Cell shows up and William shoos him away, and she has all this, and then she goes and gets ready to go out on this date that she'd already planned with Nick. And I realized, I was like, well, I had planned on her going on a date, and like, this is a good kissing scene, like you kind of space those out. I'm like, there's probably gonna do that. I'm like, why would she see all that stuff in the memory walk and go back to enslavement times, like, and then come out here kissing her boyfriend? Like, Tracy, that don't make no sense. Like, so I remember, so I had this moment of like, well, that scene's not going to work. I had to, they do end up having a romantic interaction, but if you read it, you can see that I'm like holding back. And it's a them navigating each other, and her thinking like, how do I live my life normally after having this experience and seeing what I'm seeing? Like, so she has to process all of that. And so that happens over and over and over again for me. So ultimately speaking, there's some big scenes in the synopses that are still there, in Bloodmarked for the second one, for example. But the third one is almost completely like been blasted out of the water. Like that, I would have to redo it, and have been redoing it. But I think that's the better way to write, because people love Bree, and I wasn't expecting people to love her so deeply. And I think part of that is because we're so intimately in her mind, and watching her process and struggle. And I write very close first person. And so I just said, the only way to keep this going at the quality that I want for myself and that my readers seem to be drawn to is to continue to follow Bree's heart. And if Bree's heart leads her to this place or that place, like that's got to be the story, or else it's me forcing a plot that I don't really fully experience until I'm writing it. And then I realized like, oh, that's never going to happen. Like, that doesn't feel true, like, why would she do that? So long story, but yes, I sold it with the idea for a trilogy, but I have learned as I learn how to write, and as I think about the things that I love most that were surprises, that it's got to come from Bree. And I've got to believe that she is making a choice based on her emotional state and her arc, and that it feels true to her and completely believable. And that definitely changes what Tracy thought in 2017 when I was looking at it a bird's eye view, and didn't know her as well, frankly. Like, I didn't know Bree as well. So now I'm like, oh, she would never do that. Like, for some of that stuff.
Well, I don't want to monopolize. I have another question. I just want to know, when can we expect Bloodmarked? Is it going to be early 2022?
I can't say. I've been sworn to secrecy, so I can't say. I can say confirmed it's 2022. We definitely have that. And there are announcements about pre-order links, the cover. There's all sorts of plans in place to make it a big splashy reveal. But I can't say when that reveal will be. The reveal for that information will be before the end of the year. I think that's fair to say. But I can't say when it actually is going to land. So
I can respect that.
So what advice would you give to a budding writer about the writing and publishing process?
Yes, this is a great question. I love answering it. So I would say that writing and being a writer is a practice and an identity that you can claim without ever being published. And it's a practice you can do in your own time, on your own, with friends, you know, in a club. You're a writer if you write words and you like it and you enjoy it and you've done it before and you're going to do it again. Like that's all what it, you know, that's all it takes. There's nothing more, no more requirements. And I'm not saying anything about the quality of your work. It's really just about the practice of doing the thing, right? Publishing, however, is a professional strategy and process for sharing that work in a more wide way. If you choose to pursue publishing, then you're pursuing an industry about books and about, you know, serving certain populations who are likely to read that book. And so it's a decision, you know, like I've been a writer my whole life. It wasn't until like 2016 that I said, I think I have something to say. I think I would like the experience of saying it on a bigger platform. And I think other people might like it. And I just feel like, you know, the resources of a traditional publisher are going to help support me and help me do this full time. So that's a professional, financial, mental health, you know, strategic career decision to pursue that methodology for getting stuff out there. I could also have written Legendborn and put it on Wattpad, or, you know, self-published or whatever. There are all these different ways of making your work available to other people. Or I could have just made it a weird fanfic, and then everybody on, you know, Archive of Our Own would be reading it, and I'd be like, look at that, you know. And but so I do think like separating those things is really important, and recognizing that you can choose at any point in your life to pursue publication, but being a writer is not determined by whether or not you're published. That is something that you can cultivate, and also you can take breaks from. I took 10 years between creative writing stories before I wrote Legendborn. I took a 10-year break where I didn't write anything beyond like a Doctor Who fanfic that was like 300 words. I couldn't handle it. I just was in a place where I couldn't do it. And then I decided it hurt more to not write. And so I was going to try it again. And then that was 2017. And here I am. But I was a writer the whole time, you know? And so I just give yourself grace and know that you can claim that no matter what.
Some of like the best advice ever. So thank you for sharing that with us. Jenny, did you have a question before I ask?
I'm not in any rush, so you can go ahead. You keep trying to unmute yourself, so go for it.
That's okay. Okay, so I have kind of a quick one. I had a longer one, but I'm super curious to know, did you know Welsh before you started writing, or were you able to find the words already in the language?
I love this question. So I knew a little tiny bit of Welsh, just a little bit, not enough to be able to talk to anybody, just vocabulary, certain words. And had held some of them with me from like The Darkest Rising when I read that when I was 9, which I have a copy of in the back that Susan Cooper signed, which is just, she signed it personalized to me. That's why you get published, so Susan Cooper can sign a book for you, clearly. But I decided pretty early on, because I'm a researcher and because I come from an academic background and academic training, and a pretty rigorous academic experience at UNC, that I needed to consult with experts. So the commercial publishing industry is not on that level. So I ended up paying for like 9 experts out of my own pocket, because that's just not how most authors in fiction work. And that's not how most publishers are used to working or thinking about consultants. They're just now getting to the point where they're saying authenticity readers are important for representing marginalized populations. They're not necessarily at the point where they're saying like, oh, you want to incorporate Welsh? Well, you probably need to have a consultant that you could pay for to help you do that. So I ended up finding someone who is a professor of the Welsh bardic tradition and a medievalist. His name is Dr. Gwilym Morris Baird, and he is on for Bloodmarked. He is totally all in for the Legendborn cycle. He's a geek. He teaches Welsh to English speakers. he knows about King Arthur. Actually, he lives in a place in Wales that's very, very close to a large collection of Arthurian sites. And he's just the best. And so, you know, he worked with me, and I said, well, here's a list of words I'd like to have said in Welsh in the book, but sometimes I'm not sure this is like the right word or whatever. And he's like, this is a fantasy book. These kids are many generations removed from the original speakers. Let's create new words here. Like, I can back formation. We can combine words. So Legendborn is not a Welsh word, nor is it an English word. So he had to help me figure out what that is. You know, once born in Enedig, like he was like, well, these are the roots for born, this is the root for generation. And we kind of played with things until we came up with a phrase that felt easy to say. So he and I have a massive spreadsheet. We're going through options, figuring out what, you know, could be used consistently, what could be easy to roll off the tongue, what are the things that are easy for a reader to read and not really know how to say, but just keep reading. And so he invented words for Legendborn, and he helped teach me a lot about Welsh as we're choosing how to invent the words. And then he was hired on as well to support the audiobook recording.
I'm super glad I'm asked, because this is just so cool to think that like it's half invented, but just so rooted in the original language. That's full of awesome.
Yeah, he's great. And I've had a lot of, I've had Welsh readers reach out and really be so grateful and thankful. I didn't realize until I started working with Gwyl that Welsh is an endangered. I mean, I knew it was not spoken as much, but it was listed as an endangered language. And a lot of that is from colonialism. They were colonized and they were told it was illegal to speak their language. And so we talked a lot about what that means and looks like, and the importance of using Welsh in a popular book. And so he was like, for me, this is really special because I'm of the generation where we were told not to speak this language. So now we're reclaiming it and putting it back in schools and stuff like that. So to think that I was, you know, helping support, you know, feelings of validation from people who were told they couldn't speak their language, and that, you know, colonialism and those sins are not just in the book I'm writing, but they're in other places all over the world. It was really cool. And somebody wrote me, a Welsh friend of mine who was just in a kind of an online acquaintance, and she was really emotional. And she was like, I've just, to see my language in a book, like it fits and like it's important and that it matters and it's in print and you're treating it with such reverence. Like, she was like, I just cried because I didn't realize how important it was for me to see in an English book, to see Welsh treated that way. So that was really cool.
Jenny, you have the last question.
Okay, that kind of segues perfectly into my question. So I've never even thought about, you know, the language part. So my question has to do with, I'm a huge fan of YA, and there's a lot of touches on racism and sexual orientation in the book that are just kind of like very lightly, you know, trickled in there. Why is that something important for you to, you know, address in your books?
It's really important for me because that's my experience of race and queerness and out here in the real world. Like in my experience growing up, was that I was around a lot of different people with different backgrounds, and I was around a lot of queer folks, and I, you know, was figuring out my own sexuality at a time where I was lucky enough to be surrounded by people who were like, yeah, I thought it was this a year ago, but maybe now it's this, you know, like to allow it to be a conversation was really important. And, you know, I was a part of a secret society, not like this, because obviously I wouldn't be talking about it, but a society that is in the yearbook at UNC, but as all fraternities do, especially the old ones, they have secret elements, right? We have practices. And I was very fortunate that it was a very geeky, very diverse, very quirky, very, you know, sort of, you know, both experimenting with gender and sexuality was just a part of the conversation. Everyone just said, we're all figuring ourselves out. What does that look like? And it was sort of just there. And I realized that I wanted to represent that because it's real. And I didn't, you know, some people have said it's like casual rep or whatever. And I don't think I thought about it that way, but I'm like, yeah, I mean, they got to fight demons because somebody dates a woman. It's like really the least of the issues here. Like, like that doesn't matter. And there's also all these other intimate relationships and dynamics between the oathed ones and the bonds and stuff. So I was like, you know, who someone is interested in, the way that Sel's sexuality is revealed as a matter of talking about his relationship with Nick, but it's not a part of any other conversation because it wouldn't have come up for him. But it is something he's not hiding. He just is like, oh yeah, this happened, blah, blah, blah. And it's totally a thing that I love that they gave it a beat on the page. They like, this is a reveal. It's a reveal that's personal. It's a reveal that Brie had to be at a place to be able to hear Sel say that. And they like put it at the bottom of the page and then put her O, her italicized O is at the bottom. And I really thought that was smart because I wanted it to be a big moment, but I also wanted it to not be it should be like oh, that makes sense. It should be that moment, not like, oh my gosh, you know? And so it was really important for me to represent that that's how sexuality often works. That someone like, you know, and in an ideal world, 10, 15 years from now, none of that will be notable. You know, that people, you know, you think about books and you think about being able to leave a legacy. And I hope that in 10, 15 years, Legendborn won't be notable for having casual rep. It'll just be like, yeah, that makes total sense. And that it wouldn't be called out. I actually got challenged sometimes through the publication process to explain someone's identity. Greer, someone wanted me to say like, well, can we explain why their pronouns are this? And I was like, why? Like, I don't think that needs explanation. You hear what their pronouns are. Brie hears it said out loud, and Brie uses that pronoun. I don't, you know, there are books where I think it's really important to dig into someone's sexuality as they're discovering it, experiencing it firsthand, their gender identity as they're figuring it out, what it looks like in a family. I think that's all super important for young adult literature. But I also think it's really, really important that we see it woven in as a part of someone's life while they're tackling other things, because that is hopefully where we're headed, you know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. I just love how it's not like, oh, Greer is the they them, oh my gosh, blah blah blah. It's just like, oh, Greer, they them, blah 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 blah, story continues. So I think that's great. And you know, just the story just rolls on. And I think it doesn't need to be a big deal. Who cares?
Yeah, they keep trucking. We're here, like, you know, Deepens really might kill one of us. So like, you're they, okay, like keep it moving, you know, like there's, you know, I love that there's that sense of we got to keep trucking here. We got other, you know, things we got to worry about, and respecting someone's pronouns, like, sure, let's do that. And then also let's figure out how well you can fight, you know, like I really love that flow back and forth of the book.
Tracy, this has been such a wonderful conversation. We could keep you here the entire time. I mean, you have really shared so much with us, and we're so appreciative. To learn more about Tracy's work, please visit her website, tracydeonn.com. You also can follow her on Instagram and Twitter. Her handle is at Tracy Deonn. Be on the lookout for more information about the second installment in the Legendborn cycle. Bloodmark will be released next year, hopefully in January, right, Sands? When we return, we'll discuss instructional strategies if you want to teach Legendborn. We'll be right back. We are back on the Tar Heel Teachers Book Club, and now we're going to share some instructional strategies if you want to teach this book. So what ideas do you all have about how we can bring the book to life in the classroom?
I've got something. I didn't get a chance to ask Tracy this, and Jenny, I hope you can kind of back me up on The question I was going to ask Tracy was to share a little bit about the Arthurian Wall, and that it was actually inspired. She shared this story at a young adult conference at NC State in August of 2021. And she talked about how when she was like in second or third grade, that she had one of those like your family tree or the family I come from story, activity that she was supposed to do. And that it was very hard for her as a child because her own mother had lost her mother. And she was like, and then, there's only so far that you can go when you reached what she called the wall. And that when her family was enslaved, that's when she couldn't really go much further than that. And so it's a very traumatic experience for her. Is there something I'm forgetting, Jenny? Do you feel like that kind of covers?
No, that sounds right. And just how traumatizing that was for her as a little girl. And then, me as a white person, I didn't have that problem. I went way back, my grandma could, go back, 2, 3, 4 generations. And that's something that I never thought about because that wasn't a struggle that I had. But yeah, she said that completely traumatized her as a kid. And, think about how many other people would have that same struggle. So those are the kinds of things as educators we need to be really sensitive about, that just because I can do it with no issue doesn't make it the same for other people.
Absolutely. So she talked about that from her experience. But I think that that's something that still is used pretty frequently, that we do these family histories, and that there are stories like Tracy's that make it very challenging to go back in history and to complete that. But there's a lot of reasons why some students may not be able to complete a family tree, whether they're adopted or in a foster system, or maybe they are in a single parent home and they don't have information about their family. I mean, there's so many reasons why I think that's a activity that we could maybe, do differently now that we know better. We can do better. And one of the things that I was thinking about with that is what would be more inclusive, what would be culturally responsive and maybe life affirming, what could be forward thinking versus backwards thinking. Our past and our histories are really a part of who we are as we learn through Bree, that she does actually have that connection to the Arthurian line, and the wall was a really interesting kind of twist at the end. But it really got me thinking about what kind of activities we can use that would be similar but a little bit more affirming. So for example, maybe if they could tell the story of their name, whether they know the origin like a family wise, or if they maybe just look it up on a website, or they could find a character or somebody they are named after. Like, I think there's other things that we can do. And again, it kind of helps bring their identity into themselves, and not necessarily like, this is where I come from, but this is who I am. And this is the, person I want to project. So I don't know. I think there's things that we could do, but it was just really interesting listening to her talk about that experience as like a second or third grader. And that she ended up creating like this Arthurian wall. And that plays such a vital role in this whole book and Bree's story. So I just thought that was a really interesting thing, and brought me right back to all those posters that hang in the wall of my family tree.
I was thinking about, I read, well, at the end of the book, they talk, or Tracy has written like things that she's researched, and that the things that she found in her research that contributed to her story. And she was talking about root magic and how she was researching African American history and things like that to get those parts of that the black magic part. So I was just curious, what if Bree was of a different background? How would that change the story? How would that impact the story? And I think that could be interesting to have kids put Bree in different parts of the world and research, those magical, mystical elements and origins of that, and then how that would impact the story.
I think that's a great idea, because you think there's, a million versions of Cinderella from every culture you can imagine, even, doing like fan fiction, like, all right, here's the basic plot line, take your own spin on it. And I think, kids of any age would really enjoy that.
I would love to have students write the characters that are in the mythological part of it, and if they came out right now, like what would it be like if you put them in our society? Like Merlin, okay, he's in this person, but what if he wasn't in this person and he got dropped on the campus of UNC Chapel Hill today? What would his experience be like? How would that be culture shock for him in so many different ways? But also for grandma, what would it look like for her on that, with the magic that she has? How would that look today if she were put in on the campus of UNC Chapel Hill today?
I think another theme in this book is the many organizations and the different fraternities and the different opportunities that they have being an EC or being at a UNC. And our students at different levels have that, but it just looks different. Like there's the FFA or there's the student council, there's all those different things. So how could they make connections to what they have available to them right now, like a high school, maybe probably high school level, I want maybe junior high, but probably high school level, and what's coming, and what do their adult community members have, like what sororities and fraternities are they involved in? Maybe they are interested in business. So what does the Rotary do? And how can I find out about how these different organizations work and what is their purpose, and kind of look beyond just exactly what's in their realm or their sphere, but what could they do in the future too? And that'd be a great way to bring in community members and make a connection with, like, oh, I serve on this board of this organization, and when I was in high school, I was on student council, and I run this business over here, and I was in, the animal club over here, and just kind of make those connections past the time of being in a K-12.
And I'm just going to throw this out here too. When Arisha and I worked together, we were middle school, but she did a secret society for the kids. So I think how fun, they had such a ball. Like she put like little wax sealed invitations, and she like slid them in certain lockers, and it was like, don't tell anybody, but meet us here at this time after school. And just having like a little secret society where you could theme it around any kind of some of these, like you were talking about, like the different myths around the world, or the different types of magic that belong to people's stories. And you could do kind of a secret society around those.
I was kind of fascinated by that whole part, just of wanting to dig deeper into, and I know I wouldn't get all the secrets, but being able to get, some of the background of some of these different organizations that people are a part of, and having students to go through that as well. As I was thinking about Sal's story, he carried a lot of weight. And especially some of the weight got heavier when he found out about his mom, what he was told about his mom. And it got me thinking about some of our students who have parents who have made some mistakes, and his mom did not make mistakes, she was framed. But how we have some students whose parents might be incarcerated, going through certain things, and then how does that actually impact them? And having students to kind of think through that from that lens, because no, Sale is not walking around at their schools, but they do have some students who have had incarcerated parents. My dad was in prison when I was, growing up. So, those types of things help you to think through that, and that you don't carry that particular weight, but then having that particular conversation with students about that and helping them to kind of explore it from that perspective.
And Marlo, I think that ties in so well with before Bree, after Bree. Like what if, and this is, you got to have the right setup for this, or maybe it's something that you write and you don't share and you just as a private journal exercise, but what's your thing that makes you have a before and makes you have an after? And that could be, I think, very therapeutic and very, depending on the group, very bonding for them to share those things that they've gone through.
And going off of that, how Tracy said everybody is a writer as long as you write. So just a writing assignment, a private journal, something where you're writing about something that makes you happy, and just encouraging that love of writing, to free writing, whatever you want to write about, and you're a writer. I absolutely love that advice.
I love too that she's. Oh, go ahead, Arisha.
I was going to say there were so many fight scenes, and I watch a lot of action movies and shows, and I watch a lot of everything. But just thinking, like, not necessarily a soundtrack, but if people had like entrance music, like what would be playing when they entered a scene I think would just be awesome. I see Kelly. I see you, girl.
I think that's, something that would really, really pertain to, today's students. Like, they're real quick just to, get on a computer or get on their phone and get in GarageBand and just, compose a beat real quick. I think that'd be really cool.
And why stop there? What if instead of just Brie on the cover, what if we had a new cover for like the character that you related to the most? So then they had like their own theme song and their like, what is a quote? Like if you could make, even if it's not even in the text, what quote would you create to match the character that is on the cover of your book?
I love so much that we can do with this book. Molly, any other thoughts?
Well, I was going to circle back to something Christy said about writing, that I love that idea of free writing and like the emotional, exploring the emotions that this book might bring up. Another thought I mentioned earlier about like that second history, like that's just something that still carries to me, like what this book is about. So I would challenge students to think about, like look in your textbook or look in your local history, right? And what's the history that's not been told? Like what can you help bring up to the surface? And either add a companion or rewrite something, right? Like, so if you read a encyclopedia article about some local history, like what would you add? What would you change? And what new article would you publish? I think that would be really interesting. And there's two books I wanted to mention. Have any of y'all read the new Clint Smith book, How the Word Was Passed? Oh, okay, very good. Good one that challenges history. And so he looks at places like Monticello and goes, here's this great thing, and you go on tours, but it wasn't until like the last 10 years that they would even talk about slavery at Monticello. And so there's a whole history that they just wouldn't even talk about.
What's the title again?
It's called How the Word Is Passed. How the Word Is Passed by Clint Smith. And that's just a good example to me of there's so many things that are on the surface that we just kind of accept as our mythology, I think, as you called it. And then, they're like, what's hanging out underneath. And I just think that would be a really interesting thing for kids to think in terms of like the nonfiction side of things as well. So I don't know, that just popped in my head when you were talking, Christy.
Yeah, that's a good point. So many things that you could really dive in deeply with this particular book and think through multiple perspectives and really just challenge your thinking in so many different ways and so relatable in other ways. So this was a really great selection. So if you have not picked up your copy of Legendborn, what are you waiting for? You want to make sure you pick it up because when Bloodmark come out, you don't want to be behind the times. So go ahead and pick up your copy. We want to thank everybody so much for watching. And next month, we're actually reading Ground Zero by Alan Gratz. So go ahead and pick up your copy so that you can join us for that conversation too, because we're going to have some fun with that. All right, we'll see you next month on the Tar Heel Teachers Book Club.